A Thanksgiving story of hidden success, the morning air in a quiet suburban neighborhood of the United States carried the crisp chill of late November. Inside a modest two-story house, the kitchen lights flickered on before sunrise, just as they had every Thanksgiving for the past 20 years. Sarah Mitchell stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, carefully slicing vegetables with practiced precision. The rhythmic sound of the knife hitting the wooden board blended with the soft hum of the oven preheating. Behind her, her mother moved quickly between the stove and the sink, managing multiple dishes at once like a conductor leading a perfectly timed orchestra. "Can you check the turkey temperature, Sarah?" her mother called without turning, "and make sure you set the table with the good china. Your aunt is bringing guests this year." "Of course, Mom," Sarah replied calmly. Her voice was steady, gentle, almost invisible, just like she had learned to be. The role everyone expected to her family, Sarah was predictable, responsible, quiet, safe, the one who never took risks, the one who still rented a small apartment downtown. The one who had potential, but never quite did anything extraordinary. Her younger brother Daniel, a software engineer, was considered the success story of the family. Her cousin Lily, a doctor, was admired and praised at every gathering. Sarah, she was doing fine, and somehow that was always said with a hint of disappointment. What they didn't know, Sarah adjusted the oven temperature and glanced at her phone resting face down on the counter. She didn't need to check it. She already knew what was waiting there: contracts. Closings, numbers that would change how anyone in that house looked at her if they ever found out. For the past 4 years, Sarah had been quietly building something no one suspected. What started as a single small investment property had turned into a growing portfolio of short-term rental homes across multiple cities. She had studied the market at night, watched trends, learned pricing algorithms, understood guest behavior better than most seasoned investors. While her family thought she was just working in property management, she had become the owner. The arrival by noon, the house was filled with voices, laughter, footsteps, the familiar chaos of relatives arriving with desserts, gifts, and opinions. Sarah greeted everyone warmly, helping take coats and directing them toward the living room. "Look at you," her aunt said, hugging her tightly. "Still the same sweet girl." Sarah smiled. Still the same, if only she knew. The conversation begins. It didn't take long, it never did. The topic shifted, as it always did, to careers, achievements, and success. Daniel talked about his promotion. Lily shared stories from the hospital. Everyone listened with admiration. Then, almost casually, her uncle turned to Sarah. "So, how's the apartment life?" he asked. "Still renting." There it was. Sarah picked up a glass and began pouring water. "Yes," she said simply, "still renting." Her mother sighed softly. "It's just so hard for young people these days," she added. "Saving, buying, everything is expensive." Sarah nodded. She had heard this conversation before, many times. "The underestimation, she's always been careful," her aunt added. "Doesn't take big risks." "That's not a bad thing," another relative said. "But you need to invest at some point," her uncle insisted. "Real estate, stocks, something, otherwise you fall behind." Sarah remained quiet, listening, observing, smiling when appropriate. Inside, she wasn't offended. She wasn't even angry, she just felt distant, like she was watching a version of herself that no longer existed. The message, her phone buzzed quietly in her pocket. She stepped away, pretending to check on something in the kitchen. Then she looked. "Congratulations, your Miami property generated $11,800 in bookings this week alone. Demand is increasing." Another message followed immediately. "Also, your Austin property just crossed 92% occupancy for the quarter." Sarah exhaled slowly, not out of excitement, but control. She locked the screen and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Then she walked back into the living room and picked up a tray of appetizers. "The contrast, Sarah, can you bring more drinks?" her mother asked. "Of course." She moved gracefully through the room, offering glasses, refilling plates, smiling at conversations she wasn't part of. Her cousin leaned toward her. "You know," she said softly, "you're too smart to stay where you are, you should do something bigger." Sarah met her eyes. "I am," she said quietly. Her cousin laughed, assuming it was a joke. Dinner, the table was beautifully set, golden plates, crystal glasses, carefully arranged dishes filling every inch. As everyone took their seats, her mother looked around proudly. "This is what family is about," she said, and in that moment it was warmth, connection, tradition, even if understanding was missing. The turning point conversation halfway through dinner, the conversation shifted again, this time to real estate. "I heard about a property that just sold nearby," her uncle said. "Almost $3 million. $3 million, someone repeated. "Incredible house," he continued. "Private, luxury, perfect location. Probably bought by some investor." "Must be nice," her mother said softly. Sarah kept eating, calmly, silently. "That's the level you need to reach," her uncle added. "That's real wealth." Then, almost instinctively, her mother glanced at Sarah. I just want you to be secure, she said gently. Sarah looked up and smiled. I will be. What she did say she didn't say, that she had already reached that level, that she was already generating more monthly income than most people at that table, that she had already purchased properties others only dreamed about. She didn't say it because she didn't need to. After dinner, the house slowly quieted as people moved into smaller groups. Some watched television, some shared stories, some prepared to leave. Sarah stepped outside for a moment. The cold air wrapped around her as she looked up at the evening sky. Her phone buzzed again. This time a call she answered. Hi Sarah, a professional voice said. I just wanted to confirm the closing for your next property is finalized. Everything is complete. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Thank you, she said. I appreciate it. Also, the voice added, we've already received interest from potential renters. It's a strong asset. I expected that, Sarah replied calmly. The reality inside the house, she was still the girl who needed advice. Outside, she was building an empire. The night had settled quietly over the neighborhood. Inside the house, the warmth of Thanksgiving still lingered. Half-empty plates on the counter, the faint smell of roasted turkey, and the soft murmur of leftover conversations drifting from the living room. Sarah stood at the kitchen sink, her hands submerged in warm water, slowly washing dishes. Her mother dried them beside her. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Sarah, her mother said gently, not looking up, I hope you didn't feel bad earlier. Sarah paused. About what? The conversation about your apartment. About investing. Sarah continued, washing her movement steady. I'm okay, Mom, but her mother wasn't convinced. I just worry, she continued softly. I see how hard things are becoming. Rent, inflation, life isn't getting easier. Sarah dried her hands and turned to face her. I know, she said quietly, and I don't want you to struggle later, her mother added. You deserve security, stability, Sarah smiled faintly. I have that, she said. Her mother misunderstood the sentence completely. She thought it was reassurance, it was truth. A life lived in two realities. Later that night, Sarah returned to her apartment. The small space greeted her with familiar silence. Minimal furniture, neat, organized, nothing extravagant. Exactly the kind of place her family expected her to live in. She placed her keys on the table and sat down on the couch. Then she opened her laptop. Within seconds, a completely different world appeared. Dashboards, revenue reports, booking analytics, numbers moving in real time. Her properties, spread across cities, were alive with activity. Miami fully booked, Austin high demand, Scottsdale weekend surge, monthly revenue projections updated automatically. 5 figures, then 6. Sarah leaned back, staring at the screen. This wasn't luck. This was years of discipline, sacrifice, silence. Flashback, the beginning 4 years earlier, Sarah had been sitting in the same apartment, staring at her bank account. Savings limited. Confidence uncertain. Support almost none. She remembered the exact moment. A late-night video about short-term rentals. A simple idea, what if you don't need to be rich to start, you just need to start smart? That night changed everything. The first risk, she invested everything she had into a small, overlooked property. It wasn't perfect. Old furniture, average location, limited budget, but she saw something others didn't: potential. She designed the space herself, researched pricing strategies, wrote listing descriptions that felt human, not robotic. The first booking came after 9 days. She still remembered the feeling. Not excitement, relief, the growth no one saw from there. She scaled slowly. One property became two, two became four, then partnerships, then systems, then automation. While her family thought she was playing it safe, she was taking calculated risks every single day. Back to present, Sarah closed her laptop and looked around her apartment. Soon she wouldn't be living here anymore, not because she couldn't afford better, but because she had planned something bigger, something intentional. The next morning, Thanksgiving had passed. But its echoes remained. Sarah woke early, her mind already focused. She checked her phone, a message from her property manager: your newest acquisition has high interest. Premium clients are requesting early bookings. Another message followed. Also, a potential investor wants to partner with you. They've reviewed your portfolio. Sarah stared at the screen. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel it, pride. Meanwhile, at her mother's house, her family was still talking. Sarah worries me, her aunt said. She's too quiet, another added. She doesn't think big, her mother sighed. She's always been like that. They weren't being cruel, they just didn't know. The invitation later that afternoon, Sarah received a call. Hi, Sarah. This is Michael from a private investment group. I've been reviewing your portfolio. We'd like to meet. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her voice was firm. I'm available next week. The shift, something inside her was changing, not her success, not her strategy, but her silence. For the first time, she wondered, should they know? The emotional conflict that night, Sarah sat alone again, thinking if she told them, everything would change, the way they spoke to her. The way they saw her, the expectations, the pressure, maybe even the love would feel different, and that scared her more than failure ever did. The decision building her phone buzzed again. Her financial dashboard updated. Net worth rising, assets growing, freedom expanding, and yet emotionally she was standing at a crossroads. A message from Mom, her phone lit up. Mom, I'm proud of you, I know you'll figure things out. Sarah stared at the message for a long time, then she typed, I already have, but she didn't send it. 3 days after Thanksgiving, everything began to shift. Sarah stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of her newly acquired estate, sunlight pouring across polished marble floors. The house was silent, massive, elegant, and still unfamiliar. This was no longer planning. This was reality, her reality. A $2.8 million property, private, refined, and designed for a life her family didn't even know she was living. A different world, the interior designer walked beside her, flipping through material samples. We can go modern luxury or preserve the classic structure, she explained. The bones of this home are exceptional. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Keep the character, she said, but elevate the experience. Her tone was calm, decisive, not the voice her family knew. The call that changed everything. Later that afternoon, Sarah received a call from her mother. Sarah, her voice carried a mix of curiosity and excitement. Your Aunt Carmen mentioned something interesting. Sarah's heart slowed. What is it? That couple from Thanksgiving, the ones looking for a house? Yes, they think they found their dream property again, the same one that got sold. Sarah stayed silent. And guess what? Her mother continued. They said it was bought by someone working through a property management network. A pause, then softly, isn't that what you do? Sarah closed her eyes. The moment had arrived. The truth approaches, I'll come by this evening, Sarah said. Her voice was steady, but inside, everything was moving. Back to the family home that evening, the house felt different. Quieter, expectant, her mother sat at the dining table. Her aunt and uncle were there too, no laughter this time, only questions. Sarah walked in, calm as always. Sarah, her mother said gently, we just want to understand something. Sarah placed her bag down slowly. Okay, her uncle leaned forward. That property, the $2.8 million, do you know who bought it? Sarah looked at each of them, one by one, then she said yes. A pause filled the room. Who? Her aunt asked. Sarah took a breath. I did. Silence, no one moved, no one spoke. It wasn't disbelief, it was shock. Her mother blinked. I'm sorry, what? I bought it, Sarah repeated calmly. The property you've all been talking about. Her uncle shook his head slightly. That's not possible. Sarah didn't react. I didn't buy it as an employee, she continued. I bought it as an investor. The walls break how? Her aunt whispered. Sarah finally sat down, and for the first time she stopped hiding. I started 4 years ago, she explained. One small property, then I reinvested everything. She looked at her mother. I studied markets, built systems, took risks. Her uncle leaned back, stunned. You mean you own multiple properties? Sarah nodded. Yes, how many? He asked quietly. Sarah hesitated for just a second. Enough to never worry about money again. Emotion rises, her mother's eyes filled with tears. All this time, she said softly, you never told me. Sarah's voice softened. I wanted to, she said. So many times. Then why didn't you? Her mother asked, and this was the hardest truth. Because I didn't want you to see me differently. The real reason, I didn't want every conversation to become about money. I didn't want expectations, pressure, comparison. I didn't want to lose. She looked around the room. My family, the shift in understanding, her aunt wiped her eyes. We thought you were struggling, Sarah smiled gently. I know, her uncle let out a long breath. And all those times we gave you advice, Sarah nodded. I listened. There was no bitterness in her voice, only grace. The mother's moment, her mother stood up slowly, walked toward her, and pulled her into a tight embrace. I am so proud of you, she whispered, not because of the money but because of the strength. A new perspective that night, everything changed, not the love, but the understanding. Sarah was no longer the quiet one who needed guidance. She was someone who had built something extraordinary in silence. One final twist as they sat together, her uncle spoke again. That couple, the ones from Thanksgiving, they're still looking for a house. Sarah smiled slightly. I know, they loved that property. I know, she repeated, a pause, then softly, they actually spoke to me. The room felt different now, not heavier, not uncomfortable, just real. For the first time, Sarah wasn't being seen through assumptions. She was being seen as she truly was. A new kind of conversation, her uncle leaned forward again, but this time his tone had completely changed. No more hiding, he said softly. Tell us everything. Sarah smiled slightly. Not because she needed to prove anything, but because now she could finally speak freely. I didn't do anything extraordinary, she began. I just stayed consistent when no one was watching. She explained how she started small, how she failed, how she learned, how she reinvested every dollar instead of spending it. Her aunt listened carefully. And you did all this alone? Sarah nodded. Yes. The respect she never asked for her cousin, who once gave her advice, now looked at her with admiration. I had no idea, she said quietly. Sarah's response was simple. You weren't supposed to. The call that brings everything full circle. Just then her phone rang, the same couple from Thanksgiving. Sarah looked at the screen for a moment, then answered. Hello, this is Sarah. Hi, the familiar voice said. This is Richard. We met at your family's Thanksgiving dinner. Sarah glanced at her family. They were all listening now. Yes, I remember. We recently learned that you might have connections to a property we're very interested in, he continued. The Spanish-style estate. Sarah's expression remained calm. Yes, a pause on the other end. Would it be possible to discuss it? Sarah didn't hesitate. Yes, but I'd prefer to meet in person. The meeting 2 days later. Sarah stood once again inside her estate, but this time she wasn't alone. Richard and his wife walked in, admiring every detail, the architecture, the light, the silence. This is exactly what we were looking for, Patricia whispered. Then they turned toward Sarah, still unaware. So, Richard said, we were told you might represent the owner. Sarah held his gaze. I do, a pause, then she added, because I am the owner. The moment of shock again, just like her family, silence, confusion, then realization. You, Patricia said softly. Sarah nodded. Yes, power, but with grace. Richard took a deep breath. Well, he said slowly, that explains everything. There was no arrogance in Sarah, no need to dominate the moment, just quiet confidence. The offer, we're very serious buyers, Richard said. We're prepared to make a competitive offer. Sarah listened, then walked slowly toward the window, looking out at the view. I'm not selling, she said. They exchanged glances. Disappointment flickered, but before they could respond, Sarah turned back. However, a pause. I do have another opportunity. The smart move, she explained. The estate includes a fully independent guest house, private, luxury level. Fully furnished. I've had multiple inquiries from corporate clients. She looked directly at them. If you're open to it, I can offer you a long-term executive lease. A different kind of deal. It wasn't just business. It was strategy, control, vision. Richard smiled slowly. That's actually perfect. Patricia nodded. We're not just looking for a house, she said. We're looking for a lifestyle. Sarah replied calmly, and that's exactly what this offers. Back home, a changed world. That evening, Sarah returned to her mother's house again. But everything felt different now. Her mother greeted her at the door, this time not with concern but pride. Come in, she said warmly. The quiet moment later, just the two of them sat together. No noise, no pressure, just honesty. You built all of this, her mother said softly. Sarah nodded. I did. Her mother reached for her hand. I wish I had known. Sarah squeezed it gently. I'm glad you know now. The most important truth. Her mother smiled through tears. You didn't just build wealth, she said. You built yourself. Final reflection that night as Sarah drove back to her apartment for the last time, she realized something powerful. Success isn't loud, it isn't always visible. And it doesn't need validation. Epilogue. A few weeks later, Sarah stood in her estate once again. The house was alive now, designed, finished, perfect. The guest house was occupied. Her portfolio had grown again, but more importantly, her world had changed. Not because people finally saw her success, but because she no longer needed to hide it. Final line. Sometimes, the strongest people are the ones who build everything in silence and only speak when it truly matters. The end.